NASCAR tests the next-gen car for the first time in 2021. Colleague Racing announces their Cup Series plans, and Tony Stewart gets brutally honest about why NASCAR is not returning to Eldora this year. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove, midweek edition of the show. We have a lot to talk about. There is news breaking literally as I am turning on the camera, so we've got plenty to talk about. We're going to discuss Tony Stewart's recent interview with Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic. Really good article. I recommend you go check that out. We'll talk about some of the highlights, some of the most noteworthy information that came out of that here in just a few minutes. But I want to start by talking about some silly season stuff, some next-gen stuff. Let's start with the thing that literally broke as I was starting to film today. Colleague Racing officially announced their intentions to compete in this year's Daytona 500. Colleague is, of course, the Xfinity Series team that's had some success the last few years with drivers like Justin Haley, Ross Chastain, AJ Allmendinger. This year they have 3 full-time cars competing in Xfinity with Jeb Burton, Allmendinger, and Haley as their drivers, but recent reports have suggested their plan is to go Cup racing sometime soon, and in 2021 they are set to make a handful of Cup Series starts, beginning with the Daytona 500, and today they announced their driver. Kaz Grala will attempt to qualify for the 2021 Daytona 500. He will also be their driver for select other events later on in the season. The name Kaz Grala may ring a bell if you recall the Daytona road course race last summer. Kaz Grala in the very last minute had to fill in for Austin Dillon, who had tested positive for COVID, and in his first ever NASCAR Cup Series start, Kaz Grala finished 7th in RCR equipment. Colleague Racing has a deep technical alliance with Richard Childress Racing, and they also announced today that they have officially bought the space that Germain Racing had been working out of the last several years. So they are still very, very close neighbors with RCR. Kaz Grala is very, very young. He does have a Truck Series win on his resume back when he raced full-time in 2017. He's only 21 years old, though. You gotta believe that Colleague Racing is looking at some of those road courses on the Cup schedule as potential events Kaz Grala could attempt to qualify for, but he will begin his journey with the Daytona 500. He'll attempt to qualify for that race in February. I think Colleague Racing is making a fantastic choice here. Last year, they raced in the Daytona 500 with Justin Haley as their driver. He's had success on super speedways in the past. They also have AJ Allmendinger in their lineup, who's of course really good at road courses, but AJ Allmendinger is close to 40, and Justin Haley has not yet shown consistency beyond super speedways. So finding a young and very promising driver who turned a lot of heads at Daytona last year in Kaz Grala, finding him early, I think is a really big deal for Colleague Racing if they really plan to go full-time Cup racing by 2022. I like the choice. I like the decision. We'll see how he does this year. Now, some other silly season news. Miguel Paluto has been tapped by Junior Motorsports to drive their number 8 Xfinity car part-time this year. This car is largely going to be split between Josh Berry and Sam Mayer, but Miguel Paluto is going to make a few starts in there. They've selected 3 road course events that Paluto will race in, beginning with the Daytona road course, which of course has been added to the schedule recently in February, Circuit of the Americas, and then Mid-Ohio in the summer. Those will be Paluto's 3 dates. Miguel Paluto is a Brazilian championship driver who has raced in NASCAR before. He raced in the Truck Series full-time between 2011 and 2013. Very talented driver. It sounds like JRM was able to land some sponsorship. Brandt is stepping up again big time for that team. So excited for Miguel Paluto to get another shot in a very competitive Xfinity ride. We could see him contending for wins later this year. So excited about that. We'll talk Tony Stewart in just a moment, but first we have to hit on the next-gen test from yesterday. Remember, this test was conducted sort of as a response, a sequel, if you will, to the tests at the end of 2020 when Kurt Busch and Martin Truex Jr. tested the Charlotte Roval, then they tested the Charlotte Normal Oval, and the road course sounds like the car was perfect. On the oval intermediate mile-and-a-half track, it left something to be desired. NASCAR admitted it, the drivers admitted it, it wasn't great. So over the last month and a half or so, NASCAR has made a lot of changes with the next-gen prototype for the intermediate package. And yesterday, Kurt Busch went out and tested again on the mile-and-a-half configuration of Charlotte. It sounds like he only made a few laps. It wasn't a full day, quite as involved of a test as many of the other next-gen tests have been, but we don't have a whole lot of information coming out of it. There weren't that many photos or videos or anything like that shared over the internet. It was very quiet, kind of hush-hush, but this is what NASCAR said after the test. They sounded somewhat optimistic, but it's coming from NASCAR directly, so take it with a grain of salt. We had a successful test at Charlotte Motor Speedway today, and we're able to validate some of the work we've done since our recent tests at Charlotte and Daytona. This is from John Probst, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Racing Innovation. We wanted to return to Charlotte with with Kurt to collect driver comparisons of data and driver feedback. We're happy with what we saw on the track today. Again, this is coming from NASCAR directly. I mean, Kurt Busch posted some photos himself, but he didn't offer any specific insight on as to how the car felt, what was different between this test and the test last year. So take it all with a grain of salt, but it is worth noting that the next-gen car tested again, and at least so far, everyone sounds more positive than they were in November, but I literally, you can't take any of this seriously because it's from NASCAR directly. This is a marketing deal for NASCAR. They're not going to down talk their creation right now. I don't know what to think. I think the intermediate package is still going to be the weakest of the, 3 or 4 main packages that we're going to see with the next gen car. I mean, the idea of the next gen car is to sort of build as close to a one-size-fits-all car as you possibly can. They want to build a car that can easily have a few components switched out between road courses, short tracks, super speedways, etc., so that teams don't have to spend quite as much money on having a dedicated fleet of road course cars, a dedicated fleet of intermediate cars. They can sort of mix and match. These cars are almost a one-size-fits-all. I still have a feeling the intermediate tracks are going to be what fans dislike the most. I have a feeling those are the tracks that many of the drivers will dislike the most. I think NASCAR is clearly pushing for more road courses and short tracks to hit the schedule sooner rather than later. They're sort of trying to phase out many of the lesser exciting intermediate tracks. I'm not super optimistic that the next gen car is going to be great on intermediates, but maybe this is a case of famous last words, but I doubt the next gen car will be noticeably worse than the Gen 6 at these tracks. I don't know. NASCAR's got 7 road courses on the schedule. It'll probably be 14 by the time 2022 rolls around at this rate. Sorry, I let myself get distracted there. I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart has done some interviews recently. Most notably, he spoke to Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic. Tony Stewart, of course, is the co-creator of the brand new Superstar Racing experience, the SRX, a new short track focused racing series that's set to debut this June on CBS. And I have confirmed it. The races will be shown Saturday nights on main CBS, not CBS Sports Network or whatever channel that might be. It'll be on the main CBS. That's really exciting. Last week, the SRX announced their full 6-race season schedule, including tracks like Stafford Motor Speedway, Eldora, Knoxville, Nashville Fairgrounds. In this interview with The Athletic, which I encourage you all to check out for yourselves, Tony Stewart shed some light on how this series was put together. He said once they announced the series, his phone was blowing up with drivers, friends of his in some cases, that wanted to see if there was a spot open to them. Tony Stewart kind of had to make those hard decisions and narrow it down to his main wish list. We, of course, know many of the drivers that will now be participating full-time, like Bill Elliott, Bobby Labonte, Helio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan, Tony Stewart himself, some great IndyCar drivers, NASCAR drivers from other disciplines as well. He also talked a little bit about the format, the racing format, if you will. The races will be on main CBS, and according to Tony Stewart, they have a very tight 2-hour broadcast window for each race. We're still figuring out phases and stages if we were to do that. We definitely want to break in there where guys can work on their cars. It's going to be a timed race. Thought that was interesting. So there will not necessarily be a set distance in mind, 100 laps, 200 miles, whatever it may be. It's going to be a timed race, which is at least different than NASCAR is. So I thought that was an interesting detail. Tony Stewart also admitted that he and Ray Everham are a bit nervous because it's January. And according to Tony Stewart in this article, they have not finished building even the first race car yet. And the series is set to premiere on primetime television in 5 months. I mean, I know Tony Stewart trusts Ray Everham. I trust Ray Everham, and Ray Everham is basically in charge of developing these race cars. And Tony Stewart reiterated in this interview that they don't have a specific manufacturer involved. These are Ray Everham's race cars. But yeah, Tony Stewart said they don't have any of the cars completely built yet. They haven't done any sort of on-track testing. That's a little concerning, I feel like, given that you're only a few months away from, primetime TV, from green flag day one. I don't know if there is such a thing as a startup racing series. That's exactly what this is. So things are going to move quickly. Things are going to occasionally be unpredictable. But I guess if Tony Stewart trusts Ray Everham, I trust Ray Everham too for the most part. I have a feeling things will work out. But I thought that was interesting to hear Tony Stewart be kind of honest that, hey, they're a little nervous because they're hitting a deadline pretty soon. One question that many fans, including myself, have had over the past several months is, how is NASCAR reacting to this? Because while Tony Stewart is no longer a NASCAR driver, he still owns, or at least co-owns, one of their most prominent race teams, Stewart-Haas Racing. And with the news a couple months ago that the truck series would be leaving Eldora Speedway, a track owned by Tony Stewart, there's been a lot of rumblings behind the scenes about what kind of drama there might be behind the scenes between Tony Stewart and NASCAR. Well, Tony Stewart talked a little bit about this in this Athletic article. I'll be honest with you. The NASCAR deal at Eldora was more of a different set of opinions with the Bristol Cup race and had nothing to do with the SRX. And NASCAR didn't take Eldora off the Truck Series schedule. We chose to not renew our contracts with them. Jordan Bianchi asked, "You're upset that Eldora didn't get a Cup Series race, is that correct?" And Tony Stewart replies, "Yeah, I was frustrated that Bristol got a dirt Cup race after we had been doing it for 7 years now and showing that we can do it and do it right. It is what it is." So that is pretty close to a lot of the rumors that we've heard in recent weeks, recent months, and it's not too surprising. It is a little surprising in one way, mainly. Now, I don't know exactly what goes into these truck series contracts with certain racetracks. Tony Stewart's Eldora Speedway is, I guess, an independently owned speedway. They're not directly affiliated with ISC or SMI, the juggernaut companies that own most of the NASCAR tracks. So I don't exactly know what all goes into a truck series TV contract with the track. I don't know what was really in it for Tony Stewart, but it does seem a little weird to me that Tony Stewart, the owner of a racetrack in Ohio, would turn down a NASCAR race that often draws in 20, 30,000 spectators, basically fills that venue up, draws in 500,000 viewers on TV usually. It does seem like a weird business decision to turn that down, even if you have your own personal reasons, that your own personal grudges that you may hold against NASCAR or that company in this case. It still doesn't seem like the best business decision, but again, I don't know what the contracts look like. And of course, this year in the era of COVID, I mean, the Eldora race usually wasn't until the summer, so things might be different here in a few months, but it definitely looks like a lot of races this year will not be allowed to host full crowds. That's money that Tony Stewart, the track owner, would be losing out on. So maybe splitting from NASCAR isn't that big of a deal from Tony Stewart's perspective. It's clear Tony Stewart has his principles, though. This isn't really surprising. I guess we've always known this about Tony Stewart, but I think it's really interesting to hear him be very blunt, very honest about it, and I completely understand where he's coming from. When NASCAR first announced that they were going to run a dirt race, a Cup Series dirt race at Bristol, they were going to take Bristol, a fan favorite racetrack, and fill it with dirt, cover it with sawdust, dirt, mud, whatever it may be. I said it in my first episode, I believe, where we talked about that news, that deep down, I would have much preferred NASCAR take the Cup Series to an established, purpose-built dirt racetrack like in Eldora, or they're taking the trucks to Knoxville, Iowa this year. Perhaps that would have been on the table. Taking an existing Cup Series track and completely completely changing the nature of it just didn't seem like the most effective idea in my opinion. I completely get why Tony Stewart, who's hosted Truck Series events for 7 years now at his own track, Eldora, would be a bit miffed that NASCAR would choose to debut the Cup Series on dirt at a completely different facility. Now, at the same time, I think Tony Stewart's a realist. I think he has to be realistic about it. I think we should be realistic about it. Bristol Motor Speedway seats 150,000 people. Eldora seats about 30,000 roughly, maybe a little more than that on a good day. And again, in the era of COVID, where capacities are likely going to be limited most, if not all, of this year. I mean, even the Bristol Dirt Race, which is now already sold out, we talked about earlier this week, they're going to have 30,000 fans in a reduced capacity race. Think about if they ran it at Eldora and they had to reduce the capacity, we're talking 5, 6, 7, maybe 8,000 fans as opposed to the 30,000 plus fans that will likely be at Bristol here in a couple of months. Ultimately, money is involved, and NASCAR believe they could sell more tickets and make more money hosting the race at Bristol, turning it into a dirt race as opposed to going to Eldora, which, from a racing fan's perspective who just wants to see great racing, and if it has to be on dirt, wants to see great dirt racing, I would really like to go see NASCAR go to a track that's been proven to hold decent NASCAR dirt races. I mean, the Truck Series have put on pretty good shows there for several years in a row now. It's proven that it can work. Going to Eldora, which is a very different track. Sure, they're both half miles, but Bristol's got more banking. Bristol's just a different beast all on its own. It's not traditionally thought of as a dirt track. That's risky. And I said this last week. That's risky. I think the Bristol dirt race this year is a very risky move from NASCAR. So with all that in mind, it makes total sense why Tony Stewart would be a bit miffed, because Eldora has proven that it can host NASCAR races, fill the stands, bring in a pretty solid TV audience, and not be a total disaster. I mean, the Eldora truck races have been pretty fun. I mean, they have not been a total mess or anything like that, as people initially feared would happen when NASCAR first started going to dirt tracks, in the modern era. Bristol, now you're opening up a whole new can of worms, a whole new can of risks, and I don't know, I do think it's a risky move from NASCAR, and clearly Tony Stewart was surprised by it and didn't take too kindly to it. So I understand where Tony Stewart's coming from. He's a very blunt person. He's a very principled person, I suppose. I hope for Eldora Speedway's sake that this was a smart business move, but it's Tony Stewart. I think Tony Stewart at least feels like he knows what he's doing. Anyway, I thought that was a bit interesting. Let me know what you guys think down below. Is it smart for Tony Stewart to bail on NASCAR? Did NASCAR make the wrong decision going to Bristol instead of going to Eldora, for example? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I look forward to reading your responses. That's all I've got for this episode. Thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate the support. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters, supporting the channel and supporting the show every single month. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Still more to come this week. Still plenty more to come this off season. Daytona is ramping up. We're getting excited. The 500 is right around the corner, but we've got a lot to take care of between now and then. Thanks for watching, y'all. I'll see you again very, very soon.